Welcome back to these series of lectures on Western civilization. In our introductory lecture, we talked about the course generally. I want to be a little more specific in this presentation. In high school, most students learn in their history classes. I shouldn't say learn, they memorize a bunch of useless dates and irrelevant facts that they promptly delete once the course is over. We don't teach history like that here. You won't need your memory, for instance, and we're not going to have a deluge of dates. What we do in this course is teach you to think more critically about the material. And we focus on two aspects, historical context and historical significance. This is how I organize my lectures generally. I talk about context and significance up front. And quite often the exams and the quizzes you will have will ask you about context and significance. I'm never going to ask you a seventh grade question like, when did such and such occur? That's obviously something you could Google. So again, we're looking to exercise that part of your brain, that critical thinking part of the brain that has probably been neglected, at least in history classes. So historical context, that's the big picture. That's the big story of which whatever event that we're talking about is merely a part of. What's the context for Martin Luther King? The Civil Rights Movement. What's the context for the Battle of Atlanta? The Civil War. The big picture, the big story of which our event is merely one part. Let's look at a few examples here. I was trying to think of some things that everyone's heard of. The Declaration of Independence, for instance. I know you haven't read it, but you have heard of it, and certainly you can Google it if you'd like. With the Declaration, we talk about context and significance. There's one other category that is common in these lectures and in history generally, and that is characterization. And characterization is mere description. That's the simplest thing you can do, describe something. So let's talk about three examples here, and we'll characterize and provide context and significance for each, and see if we can get you to begin to think along these lines. The Declaration of Independence, to characterize it, you could ask yourself those questions that you're taught in journalism school. Who, what, why, where, when. By answering those questions, you are essentially describing or characterizing something. So the Declaration of Independence, we could say, well, it's published on July 4th, 1776. We still shoot off fireworks and eat hot dogs on this day, Independence Day. We know who wrote it. Thomas Jefferson is the major author. We know where it was written, in Philadelphia during the Continental Convention. Those are simple characterizations. You could also characterize the document itself. What is it? Well, it's essentially a list of grievances, isn't it? Jefferson sort of bullet points all these problems or grievances that we have towards King George. He's justifying our separation from Great Britain. Now, simple characterizations. Now let's shift and ask a different question of the document. Why is it historically significant? Why should we care? Well, I think the answer to the Declaration is probably pretty obvious. It establishes the United States as a distinctly different country from Great Britain. Now, context. What's the big event that's taking place in 1776 when the Declaration of Independence is published? That, of course, is the American Revolution. So in this sense, you could say the Declaration of Independence is a part of the American Revolution, the big story, the context. Another event most of you have heard of would probably be Pearl Harbor. We can characterize Pearl Harbor, can't we? We know when it happened, December 7th, 1941. We know the time. I think it was a little after 8 o'clock on a Sunday morning. Of course, that's a great time to carry out a sneak attack, isn't it? You got people at chapel, and you got men sleeping off those beers they had the night before. So what are the characterizations? How about casualties? Around 3,000, I believe. How did the Japanese carry out the attack? With infantry? No, with airplanes. How did those planes get to Hawaii? Well, they brought them over on aircraft carriers. So we got casualties, we got method, we got date, we got time. These are all simple characterizations of the attack at Pearl Harbor. Ask a different question. What's the significance of the Pearl Harbor attack? It's significant because it brings the United States into the Second World War, and that's obviously very significant. What about the context? What's the historical context for the attack on Pearl Harbor? What's the big event that's taking place of which Pearl Harbor is merely one part? Obviously, World War II. Or you could be more specific and say the Pacific Theater of the Second World War. I'll give you another example. And this is one that probably all of you remember. 9/11. How do we characterize it? Sheer description or simple description? Well, we know the date, don't we? September the 11th. We even know the time. I think it was about 8:45 in the morning when the first plane hit. We know the casualties. It's approaching 3,000, similar to Pearl Harbor. Method, commercial airliners crashed into buildings. We could even characterize the hijackers, couldn't we? We could characterize them religiously as Muslim, or as a rather fanatical sect within Islam. We could characterize their nationalities, couldn't we? Where are these hijackers from? How many of them are there? I think there are 19 or 20. You figure you have to have a pilot for each one of the hijacked planes, and you have to have muscle to intimidate the crew and the passengers. So we got number, we got casualties, we got time, date, nationality. I mentioned. Let's follow up on that. You know, a poll was taken of the American people, and this question was asked: where are the hijackers from? And the American people responded, as you would expect: Syrian, Iranian, Iraqi, Afghani, on and on. And of course, the hijackers were all either Egyptian or Saudi Arabian. And this, of course, creates a problem, doesn't it? We can't invade Saudi Arabia, and we certainly can't invade Egypt. These are two of our closest Arab allies. We did find two countries to invade, however, Iraq and Afghanistan. So these are simple characterizations, simple descriptions. Now, ask yourself the significance of 9/11. Well, the most obvious significance is that it led the United States to invade two countries, Afghanistan and Iraq. And of course, we're still present in both countries. The other significances are perhaps domestic. Congress passed, what was it called? The Patriot Act. The domestic airline industry went through a very difficult time, a number of mergers and bankruptcies. We have increased surveillance in our society, don't we? Dissent tended to be criticized. You had to sort of get on board with this effort, this war effort in the Middle East. In this regard, you could think of the Patriot Act. Ask yourself, why would they call it that? Probably so you would not read it. If they called it the Government Intrusion into Your Private Affairs Act, you might have read it and even wired your congressman about it. So significances, we have both domestic and foreign with 9/11. What about context? Context is difficult for 9/11 because we're so close to it. I suppose the easiest answer would be the war on terror. Terrorism certainly did not begin on 9/11. And it has not ended with 9/11, has it? So I guess that's the easiest answer. Historians, taking the long view, might back up and say, well, 9/11 may be a part of this centuries-old bitterness and suspicion between Islam on the one hand and Christianity on the other. This extends all the way back to the Crusades at the turn of the first millennia. So an historian might give you an answer like that. That's the biggest context. But the most immediate context would probably be the war on terror. So I want you to be aware of these concepts, significance and context particularly. You won't need your memory in this class. You're going to need to think critically about what we talk about, engage the material, and think about what the event that we're discussing, what is it a part of? What's the bigger picture or the bigger story? That's the context. And then what are the consequences of this event? If you can tell me the consequences of an historical event, you're essentially telling me why it's significant. So your test questions and quiz questions will quite often center around these two ideas, context and significance. And my lectures will generally bring these two ideas up front and center with most everything we talk about. Thanks for your attention.